The ceremonial blade pressed against Marcus Cole's throat, and the gathered Velanthi nobility watched in absolute silence. You dare present yourself as a candidate? High Matriarch Selûnis hissed, her silver scales catching the light of 3 moons streaming through the crystal dome. A human? For the Empress herself? Marcus kept his breathing steady. He had survived worse: the colony collapse on Kepler 7, the 3 years in the Syndicate mines, the death of everyone he had ever loved. A knife at his throat was almost nostalgic. I present myself as required by your own selection law, he said, voice calm. Article 7. Any sentient male of reproductive maturity may offer himself when the Empress enters her solitary cycle. You wrote no species restriction. Murmurs rippled through the crystalline hall. 200 Velanthi nobles, all female, all standing nearly 8 feet tall with iridescent scales and 4 elegant arms, shifted uncomfortably. Their traditional robes of woven starlight rustled like distant whispers. The law was written for Velanthi males, Selûnis spat. Not for whatever you are. Then perhaps you should have been more specific. The blade pressed deeper. A thin line of red appeared on Marcus's skin. Enough. The voice was quiet, but it carried absolute authority. The crowd parted like water before a stone, revealing Empress Vaelith ascending from her throne. She moved with the fluid grace of her kind, but there was something different about her, a weariness in her golden eyes, a slight tremor in her lower hands that she quickly concealed. She was beautiful in the way that stars were beautiful, distant, burning, untouchable. And she was dying. Everyone in this hall knew it. Release him, Matriarch. Your radiance, this creature, I said, release him. Selûnis withdrew the blade, but her contempt remained sharp. As you command. The Empress descended the steps slowly, her robes trailing behind her like liquid silver. She stopped 3 paces from Marcus, studying him with an expression he couldn't read. You know what you're offering, she said. It wasn't a question. Yes, you know that no human has ever survived the bonding resonance. Your nervous system cannot process. I know. Something flickered in her eyes. Surprise, perhaps. Or something older. Then why? Marcus met her gaze. In his 34 years of life, he had learned that truth was sometimes the only weapon worth wielding. Because you asked. The hall went utterly still. I sent no summons to any human, Vaelith said carefully. No. But 3 cycles ago, when your diplomatic vessel visited the human refugee station at Meridian's edge, you spent 4 hours in the medical ward. You sat with a dying woman, a stranger to you, and held her hand until the end. Marcus's voice didn't waver. That woman was my mother. She told me, before she passed, that you asked her a question. You asked if humans ever got tired of being alone. The Empress's composure cracked, just slightly. She told you this? She said you were the loneliest person she had ever met. Marcus took a breath. My mother spent her last hours trying to comfort an alien empress she would never see again. That was who she was. And I made her a promise that if I ever had the chance, I would answer your question. And what answer do you bring, human? We do get tired. Every day. Every hour. But we keep reaching out anyway. Because the alternative is worse. The silence that followed was absolute. Then High Matriarch Selûnis laughed. A sharp, ugly sound. Pretty words from a primitive. Your radiance, surely you won't consider. I will consider whatever I wish, Matriarch. The Empress's voice had turned cold. That is what it means to be Empress. Or have you forgotten? I forget nothing. Including the fact that the selection requires candidates to pass the trials of worth. This human will be dead within the first hour. Then there is no harm in allowing him to try. Vaelith turned back to Marcus. You will have 1 night cycle to prepare. The trials begin at dawn. She began to turn away, then paused. Human, what is your name? Marcus Cole, your radiance, Marcus Cole. She spoke it carefully, as if testing its weight. My mother would have liked that name. She always said human names sounded like promises. She ascended the steps back to her throne, and Marcus let out the breath he'd been holding. He had until dawn to figure out how to survive 3 trials designed for beings twice his size with 4 arms, and the ability to see in spectrums he couldn't imagine. Simple enough. The preparation chamber was larger than any room Marcus had occupied in years, but it felt like a cell. He sat on the sleeping platform, clearly designed for a body much larger than his, and studied the datapad he'd been given. The trials of worth. Trial of body. Physical combat against a champion selected by the High Council. Trial of mind. A test of knowledge regarding Velanthi history, law, and custom. Trial of spirit. Unknown. The datapad simply read, the candidate will face the truth of themselves. Marcus was still studying when the door chimed. Enter, he said, not looking up. The figure who stepped through was not who he expected. A young Velanthi female, smaller than most, barely 7 feet tall, with scales that shimmered between blue and green. She carried a tray of food, and moved with the nervous energy of someone trying very hard to be invisible. "I am Kivith," she said softly. "Fourth daughter of the 7th house. I have been assigned to attend you, assigned or volunteered." Kivith hesitated. "The High Matriarch suggested I might find this duty educational. She wants you to report on me." The young Velanthi's scales flushed darker, their equivalent of a blush, Marcus had learned. Yes. I am sorry. I should not have. It's fine." Marcus set down the datapad. "Report whatever you want. I have nothing to hide." Kivith set the tray down, her movements uncertain. "You are not what I expected. What did you expect?" "I am not certain. Something more." She struggled for the word. "Aggressive. Our scholars say humans are a violent species. Predators who spread across the stars like a disease." "Some of us are," Marcus admitted. "Some of us are monsters. But that's true of every species I've encountered." Even the Velanthi. Kivith's 4 hands twisted together, a nervous gesture. "The High Matriarch says you will die in the first trial. She says humans are fragile, that your bones break easily, and your blood runs thin. She's probably right about the first part." "Then why do you stay?" Marcus considered the question. On the tray, he noticed food that had clearly been researched, proteins and vegetables that humans could actually digest, prepared with care. "Who prepared this meal?" he asked instead of answering. Kivith's scales flushed again. "I did. I studied human dietary requirements. I hope it is acceptable. You spent your own time learning what I could eat. The assigned rations would have made you ill. Human digestive systems are sensitive to Kivith." Marcus met her eyes. "Thank you." She stared at him as if he'd spoken a foreign language. "You thank me? Should I not? Candidates do not thank servants." "It is not done. I'm not a Velanthi candidate. I'm a human refugee who's probably going to die tomorrow. The least I can do is thank the person who made sure I wouldn't die hungry." Kivith was quiet for a long moment. Then, very softly, "My sister serves in the Empress's personal guard. She says her radiance has not slept in 6 cycles. She sits alone in her chambers and watches the stars. She speaks to no one. The solitary cycle? No. This is different. This is... know." Kivith's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "This is despair. The scholars believe she has chosen to fade. To let the resonance sickness take her, rather than bond with another Velanthi male." Marcus felt something cold settle in his chest. Why? Because she has already lost 2 bondmates to assassination. Because the noble houses circle like predators, each wanting to place their own bloodline on the throne. Because every male who offers himself wants only power, and she knows it. Kivith's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Because she is tired, human, so tired, and no one in this entire empire will allow her to be weak. The room was silent, except for the distant hum of the palace's power systems. "The first trial," Marcus said finally. "The combat. Who is the champion?" "Commander Tyreth. She is the finest warrior in the Imperial Guard. Undefeated in 300 challenges. Female? Of course. Velanthi males are smaller, weaker. They do not fight." Marcus almost laughed. "Almost. And if I refuse to fight? If I yield immediately?" Kivith shook her head. "Then you are deemed unworthy. The trials end. You would be exiled from Velanthi space permanently. But I would live." "Yes." Marcus looked at the datapad again. "Trial of body, trial of mind, trial of spirit. The Empress," he said slowly. "Does she ever visit the candidates?" "Before the trials?" Kivith's hesitation was answer enough. "She's here, isn't she?" "Nearby." "I cannot. You don't have to tell me." Marcus stood, moving to the room's single window. Outside, the capital city of Velanthi Prime spread like a jeweled blanket, towers of living crystal reaching toward the triple moons. "I'm going to fail the first trial. We both know it. A human can't defeat a Velanthi warrior in single combat." "Then you will yield?" "No." Marcus pressed his palm against the cool glass. "I'll fight. And I'll lose. And somewhere, in whatever place she's watching from, the Empress will see a human too stupid to know when he's beaten." He turned back to Kivith. "And maybe that will make her curious enough to ask why." Kivith stared at him with an expression he couldn't name. "You are very strange, Marcus Cole, so I've been told. I will bring you more food in the morning. You should rest." She was almost to the door when Marcus spoke again. "Kivith. The High Matriarch, Salunis. She wants the Empress to fade, doesn't she? She wants her dead." The young Velanthi froze. You do not have to answer, Marcus continued. But I need to know what I'm walking into. Not for my sake, for hers. Kivith didn't turn around, but her voice, when it came, was barely audible. The High Matriarch has a granddaughter. She is of bonding age. If the Empress fades without an heir, the throne passes to the strongest bloodline, and Selunus's bloodline is the strongest. Yes. The door slid open, and Kivith fled into the corridor beyond. Marcus sat back down on the sleeping platform and began to plan. The trial of body took place in the Grand Arena, a coliseum of living crystal that seated 50,000 spectators. Every seat was filled. Commander Tyreth stood at the arena's center, nearly 9 feet of scaled muscle and coiled fury. She wore ceremonial armor that left her 4 arms free, each hand gripping a different weapon, sword, spear, shield, and a curved blade Marcus didn't recognize. Marcus wore borrowed training clothes and carried a single wooden staff. You may yield at any time, the officiator announced, her voice amplified across the arena. The trial ends at first blood, incapacitation or yield. Do both candidates understand? I understand, Tyreth said, her voice dripping contempt. I understand, Marcus replied. Begin. Tyreth didn't toy with him. She was professional enough to recognize that even a weak opponent deserved a clean defeat. She moved like lightning, and Marcus dropped to his knees. The crowd gasped. I do not yield, he said clearly. But I will not raise my hand against you. Tyreth froze mid-strike, her blade inches from his throat. What game is this? No game. Marcus kept his eyes on hers. The trial of body is meant to prove physical worth. But I'm human. We both know I cannot defeat you in combat. Not today, not with a lifetime of training. If I fight, I simply delay the inevitable and waste your time. Then, yield. No, Daddy. He remained on his knees, utterly calm, because physical worth isn't just about strength. My people learned that lesson long ago, when we were still prey on a world full of predators. We survived not because we were strongest, but because we refused to die. Tyreth's blade hadn't moved. Explain, the old humans had a saying. Fall down 7 times, stand up 8. Victory isn't about winning every fight, it's about still being there when the fight is over. He paused. So hit me. Cut me. Do what you must. I will not strike back, but I will not yield. And when I am broken and bleeding on this floor, I will still be here. That is my physical worth. The arena was silent. Then Tyreth did something unexpected. She laughed, not with contempt, but with something that almost sounded like respect. You are either the bravest creature I have ever met, she said, or the most insane, probably both. The commander lowered her weapons. She turned to the officiator's platform, where High Matriarch Selunus sat with barely concealed fury. I invoke the warrior's privilege, Tyreth announced. Article 12 of the trial laws. Selunus shot to her feet. You cannot, I can. I am the appointed champion, and I choose to recognize this candidate's worth. Tyreth turned back to Marcus. The law states that a warrior may declare an opponent worthy if they demonstrate exceptional courage, even without landing a blow. Standing against impossible odds, refusing to yield, accepting certain pain rather than surrender, these are the marks of a true warrior's spirit. She extended one of her 4 hands. Rise, human. You have passed the trial of body. The arena erupted, half in outrage, half in something that might have been approval. Marcus took Tyreth's hand and let her pull him to his feet. You've made an enemy of the High Matriarch, he said quietly. Selunus has been my enemy since I refused to marry her nephew. Tyreth's teeth showed in what might have been a smile. I find I am comfortable with my choices. The trial of mind should have been impossible. 3 hours of questions on Velanthi history, law, and custom. Subjects Marcus had only weeks to study, competing against the accumulated knowledge of noble-born candidates who had trained their entire lives. He answered what he could. When he couldn't answer, he admitted it honestly. You claim ignorance of the Treaty of 7 Moons? The examiner asked, incredulous. I claim limited access to educational resources, Marcus replied. I learned what I could from public databases, but the treaty's full text is restricted to Velanthi citizens, and yet you still attempt this trial. I attempt it because I can learn. Give me the information, and I will master it. That is also a human trait. We adapt quickly. We have to. The examiner made a note. More questions followed. By the end, Marcus was certain he had failed. The other candidates, there had originally been 7, though 3 had yielded in the first trial, answered with practiced precision. Marcus had stumbled through half his responses and confessed ignorance to the rest. But when the results were announced, his name was not among the failed. Your factual knowledge was insufficient, the examiner told him privately. But your reasoning demonstrated understanding of principles, and your honesty demonstrated integrity. The trial of mind is not merely about accumulated knowledge, it is about the capacity to learn and the wisdom to admit limitations. You passed. Barely. 2 trials complete. 1 remaining. The trial of spirit. They came for him at midnight. 4 guards in ceremonial armor escorted Marcus through corridors he'd never seen, deep into the palace's ancient heart. The walls here were not crystal, but stone. Real stone, quarried from Velanthi Prime's mountains before the species had reached for the stars. They stopped before a door carved with symbols Marcus couldn't read. Beyond this door you face the trial of spirit, the lead guard intoned. You will enter alone. You will emerge transformed or broken. There is no preparation. There is no yielding. What's inside? The truth. The door opened onto absolute darkness. Marcus stepped through. He stood in his mother's hospital room. The sterile smell. The hum of medical equipment. The thin figure on the bed, so small beneath the sheets. Mom? She turned her head, and her eyes were clear, clearer than they'd been in months. Marcus, you came, I'm always here. He moved to her bedside, taking her hand. It was cold. I never left, I know. She smiled, and it broke his heart. But that's the problem, isn't it? You never left. I don't understand. After I'm gone, Marcus, what will you do? He couldn't answer. He had never been able to answer. You carry me with you like a weight, his mother said softly. Not like a memory, like a burden. You've built your entire life around what you lost. The colony. Your father. Me. Her grip tightened. When was the last time you did something for yourself? Something that wasn't about survival or guilt or honoring the dead? I don't. The Empress. His mother's eyes were piercing now. Why are you really here? Because you asked me to answer her question. I asked you to keep living. I asked you to find something worth living for. The Empress was just a story I told you. A moment of connection with someone kind. Her voice cracked. I didn't ask you to die for her, Marcus. I would never ask you to die for anyone. The room began to flicker. This isn't real, Marcus whispered. No, but the truth it carries is. His mother's form began to fade. Why are you really here? What do you actually want? Not duty. Not guilt. Not obligation. You. The room dissolved, and Marcus stood in darkness again. And in that darkness he finally spoke the truth. I want to matter, he said, and his voice broke, not because of what I can do or what I've survived. I want someone to see me, really see me, and choose me anyway. Not because I'm useful. Not because I'm the last option. Just because. The darkness didn't respond. I've been alone for so long, Marcus continued. Even when I'm surrounded by people, I'm alone. And I know the Empress is alone too. I saw it in her eyes. That same hollow feeling of being surrounded by people who want something from you, and no one who wants you. He wiped at his face, surprised to find it wet. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm projecting. But I thought if 2 lonely people could find each other, that is not a plan, a voice said. The Empress's voice, that is a hope. Light bloomed around him, and Marcus found himself standing in a simple garden. Night-blooming flowers surrounded him, their bioluminescence casting soft blue light. And sitting on a bench before him, wrapped in plain robes with no crown or jewels, was Vaelith. You spoke true, she said quietly. In the trial's heart, lies cannot exist. Whatever you said, you meant it. How much did you hear? All of it. She didn't look at him. My trial when I was young showed me my sister's death. I had to watch it happen, and know I could do nothing to prevent it. The resonance showed me that I would be Empress, not through worthiness, but through tragedy. Her voice was hollow. 20 years later, it still haunts me. Marcus moved slowly, sitting on the far end of the bench. Close enough to talk, far enough to respect her space. What happened to her, your sister, Poison? At a banquet celebrating my bonding to my first mate. Vaelith's hands clenched in her lap. They killed her to ensure I would inherit. I did not know. I did not consent. But I benefited. Finally, she looked at him. Do you still wish to bond with a creature who wears a crown paid for in her sister's blood? Do you still wish to bond with a creature whose species destroys worlds when they are afraid? Marcus asked softly. Because we do. We've done it. We will probably do it again. My hands are not clean either. That is not the same. No. But guilt is guilt. And carrying it alone just makes it heavier. Vaelith was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was different, smaller somehow. Less Empress, more person. The scholars have been studying your species, she said. trying to understand why you would offer yourself when the bonding resonance would almost certainly kill you. They discovered something unexpected. What? Human males can mate all year round. She almost laughed, but there was no humor in it. The scholar presenting the findings nearly collapsed. She could not comprehend it. Velanthi males enter their breeding cycle once every 3 years. The intensity of the resonance is calibrated to that cycle, a massive release of biological energy that happens rarely and therefore safely. Marcus began to understand. But humans don't have a cycle. No, your reproductive capability is constant, persistent. The resonance would not have a single overwhelming moment to synchronize with. It would simply keep resonating. Vaelith looked at him directly. The scholars believe this might actually save you. Instead of one massive surge that destroys your nervous system, the bond would establish itself gradually. A continuous low-level connection instead of a single catastrophic event. Might save me? There are no guarantees. No human has ever bonded with a Velanthi. You would be the first experiment. Story of my life. Something that might have been a smile flickered across Vaelith's face. It vanished quickly. The High Matriarch will never accept this. The noble houses will revolt. They will call it perversion, contamination, the destruction of our bloodline. I know. You could die. I know. Why? The question burst from her with unexpected force. Why would you risk everything for a stranger? For an alien who cannot even give you children, whose culture despises your kind, whose own people will try to kill you. Marcus considered the question carefully. When I was 7, he said finally, my father taught me how to play chess. It's a human game, ancient, strategic, complicated. I was terrible at it. I lost every game for 2 years straight. I failed to see. One day, I finally won. I was so excited I knocked over the board. And my father just smiled and said, good. Now we can really play. Marcus met her eyes. All those losses weren't failures. They were lessons. Every defeat taught me something. And when I finally won, I had earned it. You see this as a game? No. I see this as a lesson. He shifted slightly closer on the bench. I've lost everything, Your Radiance. My home. My family. My purpose. I've been knocked down so many times I've lost count. But I'm still here. Still standing up. And every loss taught me something important. Which is that the only real failure is giving up. That there's always another move, another chance, another way forward. He paused. You've been thinking about giving up. I can see it. The resonance sickness, the political pressure, the loneliness. You're tired of fighting. You're ready to fade. Vaelith said nothing, but her silence was confirmation enough. I'm not asking you to bond with me, Marcus said quietly. I'm asking you to try. To make one more move. To see if maybe, just maybe, there's a way forward you haven't considered. And if there isn't, then, at least you'll know. And knowing is better than wondering. The garden was silent except for the soft chime of wind through crystal flowers. Somewhere in the distance, a nightbird sang. You passed the trial of spirit, Vaelith said, finally. The darkness accepted your truth. What happens now? Now. She stood slowly, and Marcus saw how much the movement cost her. The resonance sickness was progressing. Now I must make a choice. The final selection is tomorrow at dawn. I must announce my bondmate before the court. She began to walk away, then stopped. Marcus Cole. Yes? My mother's name was Vaelith. She died when I was 12. She used to tell me that the stars were watching, always, and that someday I would find someone who watched back. Vaelith's voice was barely a whisper. I think she might have liked you. She was gone before he could respond. Dawn came too quickly. Marcus stood in the great hall of selection, dressed in simple white robes that Kivith had somehow procured. Around him, the surviving candidates waited in their own ceremonial finery, 2 Velanthi males from noble houses, their scales polished to mirror brightness, their forearms adorned with family crests and honors. He looked like a beggar standing among princes. High Matriarch Salunis presided from a raised platform, her satisfaction barely concealed. Behind her sat the High Council, 12 noble matriarchs, who would witness the selection and validate the choice. The candidates have completed the trials of worth, Salunis announced. Each has proven themselves in body, mind, and spirit. Now, as tradition demands, her radiance will make her selection. The great doors opened, and Empress Vaelith entered. She looked worse than the day before. Her scales had lost their luster, her movements were slower, and the golden light in her eyes had dimmed to amber. The resonance sickness was accelerating. Without a bond, she had days at most. But she walked with her head high. Your radiance, Salunis said, and there was hunger in her voice. The candidates await your wisdom. Lord Vexith of the House of Crimson Stars offers himself. Lord Tareth of the House of Endless Waters offers himself. And... She paused, contempt dripping from every word. The human Marcus Cole offers himself. Vaelith stopped at the center of the hall. She looked at each candidate in turn, the two Velanthi males with their practiced poses and political calculations, and the human with his scarred hands and two calm eyes. Before I make my selection, she said, I would speak to the candidates directly. Salunis frowned. That is, irregular. I am the Empress. I will be irregular if I wish. Vaelith turned to the first noble. Lord Vexith. Why do you offer yourself? Vexith's scales flushed with pride. To serve the throne, your radiance. To strengthen the bond between our houses and continue the imperial bloodline. And what do you know of me? Not the Empress? Me? The question clearly caught him off guard. You are the ruler of our people. The living symbol of our unity. You know nothing. Vaelith's voice was flat. You have never asked what I think or feel. You have never wondered if I sleep well, or what dreams trouble me. You see a crown, not a person. She turned to the second noble, Lord Tareth. Same question. Tareth was smoother, more prepared. I know that you are brilliant and brave, your radiance. I know that you bear the weight of empire with grace. I know that you deserve a bondmate who will support you in all things. Pretty words, rehearsed I assume. Your radiance, you also see a crown. Vaelith turned, finally, to Marcus. And you, human? Why do you offer yourself? Marcus took a breath. Because you're tired, he said simply. Because everyone wants something from you, and no one sees you. Because your sister's death broke something inside you that never healed, and you've spent 20 years pretending otherwise. Because you sat with a dying stranger, and asked her about loneliness, and that one act of kindness meant more than all the political alliances in the galaxy. The hall was utterly silent. I don't see a crown, Marcus continued. I see a woman who's been strong for so long that she's forgotten what it feels like to be weak. I see someone who needs a partner, not a subordinate. I see someone worth fighting for. He paused. And I see someone who's about to make a choice that will change everything, and I think she's scared. Not of the choice itself, but of hoping that it might actually work. Vaelith stared at him. Then, impossibly, she smiled. High Matriarch Salunis, she said, turning to face the council. I understand that you have concerns about my selection. Concerns is an understatement. Your radiance. A human bondmate is unprecedented. It is potentially impossible. It is my choice. Vaelith's voice hardened. Article 1 of the selection laws. The Empress's choice is absolute and final. No council, no matriarch, no tradition may override her will in matters of bonding. The law was not written with humans in mind. The law was written to protect the Empress's agency, which you seem determined to undermine. Vaelith took a step toward Salunis's platform. I know about the poison, matriarch. The poison that killed my sister. I know which house supplied it. The hall erupted in shocked murmurs. Salunis's scales went pale. You accuse. I accuse no one. Not yet. Vaelith's eyes were cold. But I have evidence. Testimony. Records that survived your attempts to destroy them. I have been patient for 20 years, gathering proof, waiting for the right moment. She turned to address the full council. I did not bring this before you because I knew many of you were complicit. Some through action, others through silence. The rot in this court runs deep. Then why speak of it now? One of the other matriarchs asked. Because I am dying. Vaelith's voice was matter-of-fact. The resonant sickness will claim me within days if I do not bond, and I have decided that if these are my final acts as Empress, they will be acts of truth. She turned back to Marcus. Human. Hull. Marcus Cole. You spoke of hope. Of trying. Of making one more move when all seems lost. She extended her upper right hand, the hand of highest honor in Velanthi culture. I would like to make that move now. Will you bond with me? Marcus looked at her hand. At the tired, brilliant, broken woman offering him something that went far beyond political alliance. He took her hand. Yes. The hall exploded into chaos. Nobles shouting, guards moving, Salunis screaming orders that no one followed. But Marcus barely noticed. Because the moment their hands touched, something happened. He felt her. Not physically, deeper than that. A resonance, just as the scholars had described, but not overwhelming. Not a single devastating surge, but a continuous hum, like a string being plucked and sustained. Her exhaustion. Her hope. Her fear. Her desperate, terrified, impossible hope. And she felt him too. He knew it from the way her eyes widened, the way her grip tightened. You're there, she whispered. I can feel you. I'm not going anywhere. The resonance, it should hurt, it doesn't. And it was true. There was pressure, certainly. An awareness of something vast pressing against the edges of his consciousness. But it wasn't trying to destroy him. It was trying to connect. And his human biology, his constant readiness, his inability to cycle, it turned the flood into a stream. Remarkable, a voice said. One of the council matriarchs, older, with scales of deep violet, had risen from her seat. The bond is forming. I can see it in her aura. The sickness is receding. That's impossible, Selûnis hissed. A human cannot. Clearly, a human can. The violet matriarch turned to face her peer with cold eyes. High Matriarch Selûnis, you have been heard speaking against the Empress's choice, attempting to influence a sacred selection, and, if her radiance's words are true, participating in conspiracy against the imperial bloodline. I invoke the right of investigation. 3 other matriarchs rose to stand with her. As do I, said one. As do I, said another. Selûnis looked around the hall, searching for allies. She found none willing to meet her eyes. This is not over, she said finally. The human cannot. The human, Vaelith interrupted, is my bondmate. And you will address him with the respect his position deserves, or you will not address anyone at all. Her voice carried absolute authority, and for the first time in months, it carried strength. The bond was working. Marcus could feel it, her energy stabilizing, the sickness retreating, their consciousnesses beginning to interweave in ways neither of them fully understood. Guards, Vaelith continued, escort High Matriarch Selûnis to comfortable quarters. She will remain there until the investigation is complete. Selûnis was led away, still protesting, still threatening, but powerless. The Violet Matriarch approached Vaelith and Marcus. Your radiance, what you have done today, it will change everything, I know. Vaelith looked at Marcus, really looked at him, with eyes that were finally clear. Some things need to change. Later, in the private gardens where they had spoken the night before, Vaelith and Marcus sat together on the same bench. The triple moons hung heavy in the sky, casting silver light on the crystal flowers. The scholars want to study us, Vaelith said. The bond, the resonance, all of it. They believe we may have discovered something that could change interspecies relations across the galaxy. Do you want to be studied? No. She almost laughed, but I want even less to let this discovery die with us. If human Velanthi bonding is possible, others should know. Even if it takes the galaxy a while to accept it, even then. She leaned slightly toward him, not quite touching, but close. Marcus, I must ask you something. Anything. The bond connects us. I can feel your emotions, your thoughts, when you allow it. Eventually, there will be no barriers at all between us. She paused. Are you truly prepared for that? To be known completely? Marcus considered the question. When I was in the Syndicate mines, he said finally, I spent 3 years in near total isolation. I used to talk to myself just to hear a voice. I used to invent people to have conversations with. I was so alone that I forgot what it felt like to be known. He turned to face her. Being known completely sounds like the opposite of everything I've been through. It sounds like peace. Vaelith's hand found his, all 4 of her hands, in fact, wrapping around his 2 in a gesture that felt both alien and perfectly right. I have been Empress for 20 years, she said quietly. I have commanded fleets, negotiated treaties, survived assassinations, but I have never had someone who simply stayed. Not for power or position, just to be there. Well, Marcus said, I did promise my mother I'd answer your question. And what is your answer? Do humans ever get tired of being alone, every day? He squeezed her hands. But we keep reaching out anyway. Why? Because sometimes, if we're very lucky, someone reaches back. Vaelith was quiet for a long moment. Then she shifted on the bench, closing the distance between them, and rested her head against his shoulder. Her scales were cool against his skin, but warming slowly as the bond hummed between them. Marcus Cole, she said softly. Yes, I believe I would like to reach back. Above them, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns. The same stars that had watched Vaelith's mother, and Marcus's mother, and all the lonely souls who had ever looked up and wondered if anyone was watching. And somewhere in the space between 2 very different hearts, a bond that should have been impossible grew stronger. Some things, it turned out, were worth the risk. The end.